Now, let me introduce my guest. Kwekubako is ready and should be taking his seat. So we will be having Abdul Malik Kwekubako, editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. We'll have Dr. Emmanuel DeGraft Johnson Owusu Ansa, who is of the Department of Statistics and Actuarial Science, KNUST. And then Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, Director, Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. We will have a second segment where we will be joined by Mary Aulana Ada, who is the Programs Manager of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, GII. Gentlemen, joining me via Zoom and right now in the studio, good morning and welcome to NewsFile.
Good morning, my brother.
Great.
Sorry I'm a bit late.
That's okay. Yeah. Your documents were here on time. So how you are late, I don't know how you explain that. Right. So now let's get to listen to a few people, particularly the political parties, who have been talking about the results. We hear from Imani's Patrick Stevenson, Elvis Afriankra of the NDC, the EC chairperson herself. We hear from John Boedu and Johnson Esiedun Ketia as well. Let's listen to them, what they have been saying.
The EC's claim that this has been successful has not been based on any superior metric or any superior reasoning. You don't decide after the fact that what you have done is successful or otherwise. We should know what you intended to do, right from get-go. I should also say that the idea that it's difficult, it's challenging for us to read minors off of the register. I don't think it's that complicated at all, because whatever the Electoral Commission is going to do now is what should have been done before. And it's one of the views that we have held and advocated for throughout this entire period, that for anybody to turn 18 years old and get registered on a register, if we even devoted about even 10% of the resources that went to the Electoral Commission for this exercise and double or triple the capacity of the birth and death registry, and they are building superior biometric systems and systems that are up to date, they should be in the position to tell us who's turning 18 years old in the country or not. And that becomes a primary data that is then used by the Electoral Commission, right? So right from 2012, I should say, we've held the view that if we don't fix the national identification system, things like this will continue to happen. So the EC cannot say there's no better way of reading the system off of minors, or reading the register off of minors who are on there, or foreign nationals who are on there.
Have you heard of the facial recognition again? When they speak these days, do they talk about facial recognition? It used to be facial recognition, facial recognition, facial recognition. What happened to facial recognition? Technically, any credible biometric system is able to detect duplicate registration in real time and address him. That's why when you go, you use somebody's passport and you get to the airport and they check, it will be found out. Or you're going for a visa and you go and you've been there before, they check, they will find out. That's how a biometric system works. So it beats our imagination that this exercise that is being conducted in the midst of a deadly pandemic, that people will move from one registration center to another to engage in multiple registration. What reason? Why would they do that? Why would somebody register here and go and register there? Why? If there are any records of multiple registration, the EC may have to examine the causes internally, because we are reliably informed that the EC's own biometric system is defective and therefore deduplicating registrants by itself. You recall that when they were doing the pilot exhibition, a new system, so-called, people will go and register, and the system will say they're already in the system. Do you remember? And we said it, we brought it here, we showed you evidence. People went to register on supposedly a new system, and then the system will show that they're already in the system. So if they should look internally at their systems and their processes. And that is why we are calling for an independent audit of the entire register in relation to multiple registration. Details of all those who have engaged in multiple registration, including their photographs, ID numbers, centers where they engage in multiple registration, etc., should be made available to the political parties, to this independent entity for verification. We are highly suspicious of this move because we are aware that the management of the EC has transferred almost all the experienced ICT experts at the headquarters to various regions for very strange reasons. And then they are currently moving the non-IT staff and replacing them with questionable political proclivities. Now you can go and check whether all the majority of the IT staff at the headquarters had not been moved to the regions, and check whether moves are not being made. In fact, the process is ongoing now as I speak to move almost all the experienced people at the headquarters away from the headquarters. In effect, Jim Mensah and Akufo-Addo have compromised the
law. As Ketia in Panda constituency, insisting that with a truckload, and just as they did to you, the media people, instead of them to even pass them, they couldn't pass them. They just got a cab truck and loaded them into it, and was insisting, that's it, and intimidating, and to some extent even insulting the police. This is what he did by insisting that these people must be allowed to vote. Because they were coming in batches, insisting that people who are not qualified, who are not citizens, who may not be resident or ordinary residents in the polling station they want to register, should be allowed to register. Unfortunately for him, as they finish registering and they are going with their Kia truck, one of the tires got burst. And the security agencies, particularly the immigration, was alerted. We realized that 66 Ivorians have managed to cross with the help of Asedu Ketia and his party to register to vote in our upcoming elections in December. And sometimes you ask yourself, the electoral officials, if someone comes and says, my name is Kwame Kobna, some of them Kwame Kobna, Yaodamu, some of them Kwame Yao. Ata Kwame, you look at Ata Kwame, you must say that the same name is Kwame. Kwame Yao. This is what happened. And this is what, if our agents or security agents try to challenge, the NDC creates an impression these are errors that we are preventing from registering.
We now come to the number of persons who registered as at day 36. The number of persons amounts to or add up to 16,932,492. At the end of the two-day mop-up exercise, 30,814 persons had successfully registered as part of the 2020 voters registration exercise. In a nutshell, the total number of registered voters at the end of the 2020 voter registration exercise stands at 16,963,306. The process of deduplication and adjudication, which are currently ongoing, will flag multiple registrations in the system. Additionally, the challenge system put in place during the registration and exhibition exercise will further flag unqualified voters on the register. Ultimately, these processes will contribute to the cleaning of the register and ensure its integrity and credibility ahead of the 2020 election. We would like to assure the good people of Ghana that as a commission, we are determined to put in place and ignite all mechanisms available to us to clean the register and rid it of all unqualified persons, i.e. minors and foreign nationals. We are confident that at the end of the day, we will present Ghanaians with a credible register that reflects Ghanaians only, a wholly owned Ghanaian endeavor.
You're welcome back. So you heard Patrick Stevenson, senior research fellow at the Imani Africa. You heard he was disputing the EC's claim that there's no other way to clean the register than their approach. Elvis Efrie Ankra, Director of Elections at the NDC, accusing the EC of compromising the electoral process. And you had EC Chairperson Jean Mensah also reiterating and emphasizing the very sound point that the president made some time ago about having a register that is truly a Ghanaian register and not a West Africa register. Right, you had John Boedu, General Secretary of the NPP, accusing Esiedin Ketia and the NDC of bashing Ivorians. The NDC reacted by saying that it is rather the NPP that did it and turned around to hold a press conference to accuse them. Now, my guests are seated. And as I mentioned earlier, joining us via Zoom is Dr. Emmanuel de Graaf Johnson Owusu-Ansah, Department of Statistics and Actuarial Science of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Doc, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so I need you to unmute yourself. I can't hear you. If you can unmute yourself, your mic. All right. It's not clear yet, so let's sort that out. Dr. Akudjason, welcome to NewsFile.
Good morning,
right.
And good morning to your viewers and listeners.
Great. And good to have you because in the course of this week, the CDD and its partners organized a roundtable where you discuss issues that have come up from the elections, particularly ensuring that we will have peace going into December 7. And Kwekubu Akutu has been continuing on his court victories.
Yeah. Congratulations on that one.
He had a second victory, yes. And he's very certain of another one if they continue to pursue it. All right. Okay, so let's try if Dr. Owusu-Ansah can hear us clearly. Okay, right. Okay. So I'd like to start with Kweku today, looking at the figures that we have. We were doing some 15,700,000 plus, and now we have 16,900,000 plus. People have been doing their permutations, looking at the various regions, the number of voters that have added onto the numbers that already existed. What's your analysis of the register?
Well, first, the process towards compilation of this register. We all know before it began in earnest, there were fears, apprehensions, and suspicions. I hear certain interesting voices, but it's contradictory and a bit inconsistent. I've heard leading members of the opposition National Democratic Congress saying that overall they think the process went well in spite of the incidents of violence.
The president says so.
I heard him, and I thought that was quite significant. Same with other voices on the side of the ruling party. Of course, none of them has ignored or underplayed the incidents of violence and some abuse of the challenge process,
right,
which was obvious. But overall, in spite of our fears, apprehensions relative to time and space, COVID COVID-19 implications, I think fairly, genuinely, the process has been largely successful. And the EC ought to be commended. It's within 38 or 39 days, they've been able to register almost 16.9 plus million Ghanaians. Of course, there's a challenge, the adjudication things in place. But if you look at the percentage of those who were challenged, and the figures are here, I'm not able to go straight to them, but obviously it's less than 1%, if I'm right, in terms of the challenges. So assuming that some of those challenges become successful, I'm not sure we're going to go down below 16.8 million. So largely we have, but there are implications. There's still implications, especially when the EC itself has told us that there's evidence, if you like, quote unquote, at this stage of presence of minors and foreigners.
All right.
So, and I have to be very honest with you, it shows that this challenge, and that's a challenge that was predated this new compilation of register. If you go to the CRAB report, the CRAB panel report, the 2015-2016, they actually made that observation that because the biometric register or registration process is unable to detect minors, that is relative to age, and also foreigners relative to nationality, it posed a serious difficulty. And they actually indicated that the human factor was part of the causes of this particular challenge, because of the corruption of the process of registration indulging by the parties and the EC officials themselves, especially the temporary staff. So it's a huge challenge. And here we are back to the same thing. But my view is that minors and foreigners, in which category? Are they part and parcel of those that have been challenged? I don't think necessarily. There could be some who were not detected and are present on the register. The question arises as to how we are going to manage to identify them as minors, as well as, you know, foreigners. Maybe when it comes to the exhibition period and all those things, there are still avenues for detection and, for that matter, correction. But generally, I think it's been a successful process, and the EC and all Ghanaians, including the political parties, in spite of the misconduct here and there, can be congratulated for having done a good job. It's just the first phase. Come the election day, we have another challenge.
All right. Jasati.
Good morning again.
I've seen you have been putting the numbers together.
Yeah, for some reason you made this a numbers news file.
Right.
I realized
so I was forced to go back to my math. Yes, but yeah. But I just want to echo Uncle Kweku's initial observation. I think that I struggled to see how we were going to be able to compile a new register in the context of COVID and the time pressure that the EC had to deal with. And you have to remember there were court cases that even compressed the electoral calendar even more.
That's right.
So I think the EC has to be commended for being able to bring the process, at least the data collection, to an end. It does not dismiss arguments about whether we needed to do a new register or not, or whether we needed to spend a certain amount of money on compiling a new register. I think those arguments will continue. But often, and really, the technical people at the EC because they are the ones, they are like soldiers in the army. When the command is given, you have to deliver. And what it takes to be able to, the logistics and the focus that it needs to be able to deliver something of this sort, it's not an easy undertaking. So often they are left out in the congratulations because you probably not even see them. Mm-hmm. But they are the ones that have to make sure that there are enough material, that if there are problems at the polling station, at the registration center, that they need to fix it. So I think their congratulations really go to them. Mm.
It's good to hear that from you, because you belong to the double dozen CSOs that brought up all the reasons why we didn't need a new register.
Sure.
And we didn't have to spend that much.
Sure. And as I said, it doesn't take away those arguments. But I know what it takes to be able to do this. So we still have the exhibition of the register to go. There will be opportunities for some objections to be made, and maybe some further adjudication before the register is certified. So there's still some way to go. And I'll come back to the issue about minors and foreigners and what processes we can use to clear that. But I think just initially on that, I don't know if you are going to pose the questions what arises from the numbers and so on. But maybe I'll leave that to you.
We'll do so.
We'll do so. But yeah, initially, I think the people need to be commended for bringing us to this point.
Right. And you, as a governance CSO, have been concerned about the incidents.
Yes. Yes, and that has been particularly worrying. So when we look at the trend data over the years, it's always been election-related violence is always higher in the pre-election environment than on election day. It can also get bad immediately after election. But in this particular pre-election phase, we have seen more major incidents involving, the use of arms, destruction of property, and as you know, there are 2 young people who are dead, than we have seen in previous elections. And there are various things that...
You mean elections or registration exercise?
So we kind of put it in the registration exercise.
I'm not sure we can find a registration exercise where we recorded deaths. Do you have any recollection of such?
I'm not sure.
It doesn't immediately come,
Right.
But definitely there's been a lot more shooting, and that maybe signals certain things, that a lot more people have arms. So when you get clashes, it's more likely to be fatal than in the past, where you get maybe cutlass wounds and other knives. I mean, that's not to say that is a better, but it means that the likelihood that people will get hurt.
So how do we preempt that? How do we prevent it?
Well, when we had a roundtable.
Christian Council, other groups, they've been heard this week. That's their major concern going into December 7th.
For me, the answer is a very simple one. The police have to do their job and do it with expedition, because the problem is the lack of a deterrent. People have used politics as a cover, elections as a cover for reprisal, for revenge, so a lot of, if you look at some of the areas that have flared up again, Doma and Banda and all those places, these have been constant flashpoints. Because if you go back, you will see that there's a history of violence, and somebody just waiting for the next election, to exact vengeance.
Right.
So every time the police fails to do its job, and do it in a way that is transparent, that signals to anybody who wants to do that you will be arrested, you will be prosecuted, you will be jailed. Then you will get a recurrence of it. And election after election, you pile up. So there's a lot more people who are in pain and angry and waiting. So we are creating conditions for something to escalate. And then when you start adding arms and weapons and stuff to it, then you are really creating a toxic situation. So what we wanted to tell the police,
reliance on the police, but in elections, the police are also working with the election security, and you have security. You have done the analysis and complained over it again about the architecture of the RegSecs and DISECs.
Yeah.
They are headed by the politicians, and the police, their problem in dealing with politicians who are committing crimes. They get punished for doing it. So sometimes, so we play the ostrich about it, but that's the reality.
Well, really after Yawaso, we made it very clear, and the Election Security Task Force architecture has made it very clear since 2008 that the senior-most police officer in the structure is the head, in terms of the Election Security Task Force, is the head of that structure. It's not the district chief executive. So what we are saying is that we as citizens, as organized groups and stakeholders, if we can only deal with this through law. I don't know how else you are going to persuade somebody who the clashes that happened in Doma and the people who got injured. How are you going to convince them that they should forgive and move on if there is no justice in terms of the people who attacked them? The solution is the police doing its job. And we are saying is that the police has to be transparent. If you have arrested people, if you have people in jail, publish them. If they are being prosecuted, we need to see so that the populace can see that there is punishment for these kind of crimes. They are holding back, and then they'll complain that it's somebody else. So if it's somebody else, then who is the one who is appointing the IGP? If the IGP is not doing his job, then he should go.
Okay.
Because, and just one more thing. If you look at all the incidents that happened, you will see destruction of property, you see injuries. Even people who had nothing to do with the clashes can get hurt. So you'll be going to go and vote on December 7th. Somebody, the skirmishes somewhere, stray bullet, before you know, you are dead. That is the kind of thing that we want to avoid. So the police must act. If they are not capable of doing that, then they should go for somebody to come and act. And I think we need to put that pressure.
Okay. Dr. Suansa, thanks for your time once again. What is your assessment of the process?
Good morning, Samson, and then to my senior colleagues, and then good morning to all listeners. My assessment of the phase is that, first of all, let me congratulate the Electoral Commissioner. I think they've done a fantastic job over the days. I don't know if some of my senior colleagues here can recall it. I don't know the last time that we had phases in registration. I think for them to go through the phases has also helped a lot in the decongestion exercises in some of the places. For instance, where I registered, there was actually no congestion over there throughout the period, the days that they spent here. Around my constituency here in Oforikrom, especially on campus, I think you hardly see congestion anywhere. If you look at Aigiasi Kote along that way too, I think there was no congestion over there. Now, if you look at the general preparation of the Electoral Commissioner and the kind of work that they've done, I think it was a well thought through, even though it was under pandemic. But it was quite important that we have to congratulate them because they've been able to achieve it, something that we all thought it wasn't possible in the early stages. Looking at what my senior colleagues have also said about the stakeholders, largely this kind of conflict has been between the two largest parties that we have in Ghana. And it has always also been in the flashpoints, because if you look at some like Ashanti region, we hardly recorded cases which are much more of conflict, with the exception of some areas in Asawase constituency where there's some kind of misunderstanding understanding that went on well. So in general terms, I'm expecting some of these issues to come out. I'm expecting some of these messages to be given by the political actors, but I'm not surprised. It's not a surprise to me in case that it keeps on happening in all other elections, with the exception of the district level elections, that we don't get these things. So, let me congratulate the EC. They've done a good job. Let's leave the rest for the political actors to debate about.
You heard the NDC's Director of Election, Elisa Ankra, suggesting that, not actually suggesting, demanding an independent audit, raise the issues and demand an independent audit. What do you say about that?
Audit to the numbers or audit to what?
There are issues with the register which the Electoral Commission has admitted. We know that these are the ritual issues you expect to be with a registration process.
Yes, sure.
Elisa Ankra says, supply us the list of all the issues, the question of minors, the questions of foreigners. Supply us the evidence, supply us the list of these numbers, and then let's have an independent, auditing process to go into it.
It is the right call, looking at, in fact, the EC actually wants to ensure the integrity of the register itself. So that's the reason why they even made these ones available in the first place. So it's the right call, and I know that all the political actors are going to be on board to make sure that this issue is being sorted out. But before that, some say we can also subject the data that they've put out there into perspective to see whether in the larger extent the data reflects actually the population that we have. And some of these issues can be trashed out as we move forward.
Before you get there, when you say the call for an independent audit is a right call, do you remember any precedents like that the Independent Electoral Commission is doing the work that the Constitution entrusted to do, and one of the parties is asking that it should bring in a third party?
The EC has the power to do a lot of things that it wishes to do. The EC has the power to call people to come on board to help them to trash this one issue. I'm not expecting the EC to give entirely its data to a consulting firm or a firm that it has nothing to do with it for it to come and do its work for it. No, I'm expecting the EC to lead the charge, put in independent-minded people who have the capacity and then the knowledge in that area, bring in all the political actors, including the independent candidates, all of them on one board, and then this one can be solved. This is not the first time this issue has come, and we're expecting that the historical basis that they've used to solve these kind of problems, they will still revisit that kind of dialogue in order to deal with this issue. They've been dealing with this issue in 1996, in 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016, and up till now. So I'm not expecting that. This is not something that's above the EC to be to execute this successfully. Okay,
so now before you go into, your analysis of the figures, let me have Kweku and Dr. Asante say something about this. The call by the NDC, is there a basis for it? What do you think?
There's no basis for it. As we speak, do we have a legal regime relative to how to scrutinize the register? Do we have or do we don't have?
Except when we have gone to court and the court has compelled a third party like KPMG to audit.
You just preempted me. I was going to say that bottom line, if they are so concerned and they think they have the evidence, they know where to go. Otherwise, we have processes. Okay? The deduplication process is there. This adjudication process that comes with the challenge process is there. The exhibition process is there. Indeed, the parties are given the provisional register before the certified one. I'm sure I'm done right on that. So you can go through. There are many processes that, when they are combined and properly managed and activated could help address their concern. But to ask for an independent audit by an independent body, it's just recycling this whole element of suspicions and, you know, that they have been doing from day one.
You refer to the VCRAC CRAB committee. That was the EC's initiative, was it not?
Yes. But that was not an independent audit of the register. It was not. It was a panel. They set up a forum for all the parties who were agitating for a new register and those who were insisting on the retention of the register to bring their evidence. The committee, the panel, evaluated the evidence and made recommendations. The EC did not contract an independent audit.
Yeah, but that process too, there's no law requiring the EC to do so. And yet it did it because it wanted to enhance the transparency.
Yes, but I think at this stage, look, we've gone to, I'm looking at the NDC's position. That has been, you know, it's inconsistent. It's been moving from one level to another level. They never appear to be satisfied with the process. In spite of the fact that now we are hearing some of their leaders saying that, oh, this has been largely successful. So what is the element, what is the challenge? What is it that we are going to call in the independent auditor to do that the existing laws cannot do? I don't think they have a case.
He said they have a suspicion, Dr. Asante, he said
suspicion, we should interrogate suspicion.
They have a suspicion that the commission is compromised. They speak about mistakes and over-reporting of figures in their opponents, in opponents' strongholds. They talk about under-reporting of figures. They refer to the Ashanti region where they brought the EC's attention to some of the wrong figures. The EC made an admission that there was a need for correction of some of these. They refer to the question of minors and so on and so forth. Are these not genuine situations where if the EC wants, like they say, sunshine is the best disinfectant, to open up?
All right, thank you, Samson. So I don't agree. I don't think we need an independent audit of it. There's one aspect of it which I do agree with, which was the publication of persons who have done multiple registration or have breached laws.
Right.
And it goes back to my point about deterrence. We almost have to be deliberate and transparent in prosecuting people who offend the rules. And it has to be publicly done so that everybody knows that there's actually a consequence for these kinds of actions. Otherwise, then we'll come back again to deal with that. So I agree with that. But I just wanted to just give some information on why I think we don't need an independent audit. So the EC inaugurated the 16-member committee to look at issues of registration, multiple registration, and other kinds of, to clean the register. It's a very important job because the deduplication committee, because it's important. There's that aspect because we have become more technologically inclined with these processes. You need the transparency around that process as well. It's not just done by people at the EC office. The parties have to be there.
But party reps on that committee.
That's the point I'm trying to make. That the 16-member include party representatives there. So that is one opportunity to make sure.
Party representatives, there's civil society.
There's civil society representation there as well. The EC people, IT people, they are all there. So that gives you an opportunity to check if there indeed people who have been registered multiple times are actually deleted. Then when we come to the exhibition process, there is an opportunity for you to object to people on the register if you think that they are not qualified.
That's right.
If you go to CI 91, clause 23 of it, it gives you that opportunity to do that. And then the district review registration committee will then look at it. All that process has to be concluded before it goes to the magistrate.
And all of those processes are transparent.
Very much so. So there is still opportunity if, and that's why the provisional register, when it's given, is very important. so that the parties, if they feel they have particular areas where they want to zero in, they work with their polling station executives and other executives to look at what the list and be able to raise objections.
Okay.
You know, even if you are not sure, you can raise the objections. If you go and it doesn't succeed, that's a different matter.
Okay.
So I think that process should allow us to be able to clean the register. What it cannot do, on the other, is that it's very difficult for you to tell who is a foreigner and who is a minor in that particular case. And I don't think you can do that through that process. So
the parties have done that already.
Which one?
Why didn't you hear John Wodu showing you how to detect who is a?
Yeah, but you have to go and defend. You have to go and defend your position.
And I'll raise that. You know, I mean, because
I was just drawing his attention that the parties have a way of doing it.
Yes, but I think it's that the issue of identity is an issue that we have to handle in a very, very sensitive matter.
That's right.
Yeah. Because beyond elections, we still have to live together.
Yeah.
In this, in this polity.
Yeah.
So it's, people can throw things around, but you can really hurt people when you go overboard with these things. So I think it's a very, very important issue that we have to be very careful. But it doesn't solve our problem. So for me, if you ask me, I have issues with at the end, whether we have, the most credible register or whatever it is. I would just take it as a baseline. And it's the same thing that has happened since we did the biometric. You just, from election to election, you have a certain baseline that assures you that at least you are closer to the real population than it has been. You can never start off, because when you are using vouching and all of those things, it's very difficult for you to really say that you can get a register that is really truly Ghanaian, right? Yeah. So, but that's an argument that we can pursue later on.
So now let's go to the numbers game. I just wanted to read this portion of their statement so that it is in better perspective some of the basis for which he was calling for what he was calling for. He said, "We are highly suspicious of this move because we are aware that the management of the EC has transferred almost all the experienced IT experts as headquarters to various regions in order to facilitate the agenda of rigging the elections for the NPP in December. Currently, non-IT staff are being transferred and will be replaced with persons with questionable political proclivities. In effect, Jean Mensah and Akufo-Addo have compromised the electoral process. The parties, when they are in opposition, the Electoral Commission is the extension of the other party. We hope that the so-called deduplication will not be an excuse to delete the names of persons who belong to certain ethnic groups. We believe that this comprehensive audit will also help address our observation during the pilot registration exercise where there were cases of false matches owing to system failure in order to ensure that genuine persons are not disenfranchised." Okay, so this is where he called for the independent audit in relation to multiple registrations. Now, Dr. Usansa, now let's speak to the numbers. How do you interpret the numbers?
Samson, to interpret the numbers, I think we should be able to do some form of analysis and compare it to the national data. Ghana Statistical Service, they've been doing projection over the last 10 years, so they've been able to give us some projection over the years. Now we can take us through up to this point. One thing that we should not lose fact is that a lot of the people actually registered with the Ghana card. So it is expected that the age that they have there is correspondent into their actual age. And that one will give a reflection on the population data that we have. Now, if you go through, we've seen that as of the last mock up, the EC said that they've had up to 16,963,306 people who have registered. And then if you look at that, they have the regional distributions that they have. giving the majority to Greater Accra region, which actually resulted to some 3.5 million. Now, if you look at this distribution, it is also very clear to us that the percentage changes that we have there is a true reflection over the years, as the projection actually says. Now, if you compare this to 2016, as the EC has already done, the voter share actually resulted Greater Accra actually having some 19.5%, and then with Central Region having some 18.95%. That gives us that these two regions actually had some form of increment. Even though Central Region is not high, we have a reason of putting it there. Because comparatively, we also did some analysis with the population share ratio. And this population share ratio in 2016 was a projection by the Ghana Statistical Service. It also shows that the Central Region actually had some 8.6% and Greater Accra having 16%. So in 2016, Greater Accra were having the voter share more than its population share in comparison with the national population data. If you look at the voter to population ratio, still Greater Accra had 66.41%. It means it has some 4.6 million people. Out of it, about 3 million people qualify or are seen as adult to have registered. So they have the highest number, with the rest, all of them being around 50+%. Now, if you compare this to 2020, the 2020 estimated population actually puts Greater Accra again at still more than 5 million. And then the voter registration also puts it around 3.5 million, giving Greater Accra some 69% of the population vote in Greater Accra being seen as adult. Now, if you look at the voter population as against to the voter share, it is very clear to us that Ashanti region has 17%, but has a voter population of 19%. Greater Accra had 20% of the voter share, and then they had around 60%. No, they have 16% of the population share. Now, these differences actually resulted in some regions having more values than the other. The regions that actually saw a huge number increment in these differences includes the Central Region, which had 160,000, Greater Accra, which had 445,000. We have the Ashanti region, which had 141,000, the Brown have 149,000, and then the Northern region, which has 203,000. Now, this increments it resulted in Greater Accra having some 14.56% of the percentage voter gain from 2016, whilst Ashanti region had 4.9, Brown have had 10, Northern had 14, as comparatively to 2016. But the voter share gain distribution actually favored more of Greater Accra again, which had a that is going to be the battleground for this particular election. And then if you look at the voter registration that we have, it shows that it is a true reflection of the population projections that the Ghana Statistical Service
Dr. Osuansa, your analysis got truncated a bit before you came to say these.
The battlegrounds will actually be the Western, the Central, the Greater Accra.
Why?
The Western, the Central, the Greater Accra, because they had some gains from 2016, and then the gains in the 2016 is significant enough to alter the dynamics of the election. Now, if you move on to compare
I thought the Northern region also had significant gains as well.
yes, the northern region had a significant gain, but the northern region is not a swing region. And once it is not a swing region, it is very difficult to put them into that category of changing the dynamics.
Understood.
So with these three being the swing regions, that is why it is so important that it will change the dynamics.
Okay.
Now, let me also emphasize here that these changes in the numbers is as a result of the COVID, because a lot of people has to stay at where they live to register. Unlike previously, where you have to move to your town or village to be sure that you can register in the town or village, this time around, that wasn't so. Another reason is that much change in Greater Accra is also as a result of most of the closure of the tertiary institutions. Remember, KNUST has 60,000 students population, and then the university is closed right now. So during the registration, I'm expecting a follicrum number to drop drastically for not less than about 30 to 40,000. These people will be distributed across their regions. But the question is that which region actually contributes more of its population towards tertiary education? Actually, it's going to be the cities. So I'm expecting Greater Accra to have a chunk number, and Ashanti region also to have another big number. So
but the factors you consider, don't you include the closure of the borders and Ghanaians who are stranded and are unable to participate in the process?
Samson, if you want to factor these ones into the numbers, then the numbers is actually also going to go up again, because majority of these people who are outside the country did not have the opportunity to register, whether they are in abroad or they are within the West African sub-region. It will still give us a more reflection, but yet the closure of the schools, the movement restrictions actually have played a major role in these dynamics, in making sure that these numbers keep on increasing, especially if you look at northern region. That large number increase in northern region is as a result of people staying where they are to register.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, so from the academic statistical point of view, let's come to Kweku Bako before we move to the CSO academic statistical point of view. Yes, Kweku.
Yeah, but a quick one on what my good friend Elvis Afriankra was saying. There's too much suspicions do not help. There was this point about facial recognition. Facial recognition. I'm not too sure there's no facial recognition with what the biometric registration we went through. There is.
It will come in during the verification.
Yes, so it's there. So the impression should not be created that people spoke about facial recognition.
Can you explain that? It will come in during the verification.
So the facial recognition is a fail-safe for your failure for the biometric.
Yeah.
The fingerprint to recognize you.
Right.
So if you go on election day and it doesn't recognize you, you realize that the EC said there were about 64,000 or so people who had damaged.
Very small number.
Small number, about 0.3%.
Yes.
So the facial recognition will be the fail-safe if you don't have.
Right.
You're not able to.
Yes, and as he's saying, the EC has spoken to that. Unless you have evidence contrary to what the EC is saying, that indeed there isn't anything like that, there's no need to keep recycling those things. It is in the last EC press conference that they had, they let the citizens know. It's in there that they have that application which will be activated when your fingerprints pose a challenge. Then there's also the point about transfer of staff and the context in which he looks at it. It's an administrative action if indeed has been transferred. Now, give us the evidence. Don't just say it. But even if you say it, on what basis are you questioning that administrative act by an election management body if it decides to transfer? It is not new. Transfers within the EC did not start today.
Their point is that the experts that the EC has here in Accra have been transferred elsewhere, and will not be available to do this exercise.
Did he give you the evidence?
That he's suggesting. So,
did he give us the evidence to that effect?
And their point is that they want the independent process if the EC wants the NDC to accept any deduplication exercise.
What I would actually, I think if the NDC can help us more to elaborate how they think the transfer would affect the way the system is going to work.
First of all, whether
they say it's a suspicion.
Yes, sure.
They say it's a suspicion.
Yeah, sure, but you are only worried if you believe that by transferring these people, there will be a problem, like a gap or something there. Because as I see the process now, they are going to use shortwave to transmit the data from the districts. So actually, if you have better IT experts at the district, that's where the information is going to come. And if there's going to be any problem, it will start from there. It's not at the headquarters.
They say the transfer is intended, they suspect, is intended to facilitate the agenda of rigging.
But how? Because, you see, we can all help each other.
So that their absence means you can have other people who are, by their suspicion, you can have other people who, you know, think along what you want to do. That is, if, in fact, there is any such...
Okay, so if the evidence is provided, that is how... Because, I mean, we are all very interested. The transmission of results have always been a challenge, and it's going to be another challenge come 2020. Right. We need to understand what the concerns are so we can deal with it in time before...
Right. I think all of you have been unanimous about the fact that this is needless.
No, look, it is needless.
There are various layers of transparency that the NDC itself is involved and civil society is involved, and so they should just keep to that.
It doesn't help.
Okay, let's get to the numbers.
No, it's important. They made another point of deletion of people with names, ethnic, some ethnic
that was the point, yeah.
It's just wrong. Look, we ought not to encourage the growing of suspicions that have no foundation. And this has been going on for a while until they went to court. The court determined, we've gone through the pilot process, we've gone through the regular process, and your own flag bearer is even acknowledging that this has been largely successful. Why do we, at this stage, continue to grow suspicions and recycle them? It's wrong.
We hope that the so-called deduplication will not be an excuse to delete the names of persons who belong to certain ethnic groups.
Come on. And we are supposed to digest this. It's indigestible.
Okay, so let's move on then.
Now,
like you always like to quote the Supreme Court. Multitude of suspicions do not constitute proof.
I'd forgotten. I knew I should have. Yes, but that's the fact. And we should be very blunt about those things. But in any case, the game of numbers. I've been listening to the two major parties, their spokespersons and representatives. Some have been very cautious. They've declined to interrogate the numbers at this stage. These are just numbers of registered voters. Do not necessarily translate into actual voting for you or not.
I think you should listen to some of them carefully. That there's a certain science and data to it, like Wontumi will say. I was listening to him.
Well, if
you know, after they were done with the exercise, he actually organized a sort of a celebration. And his point is that they've been able to successfully, you know, depopulate particular places and
mobilization, your organization, post-registration for the parties. It is what message you are crafting, how you are communicating that message, and what organizational and mobilizational strategies you are putting in place. That is what will attract the votes, the numbers, onto your side. Okay, that's the way I see it. So what they are doing now is shadow boxing, you know. But I agree with the analysis that was made, you know, to the extent that the swing regions, and again, this is based on precedents. We know quite a lot of those regions. This is Greater Accra, I said, Central and Western.
Yeah, but we have to add BA to it.
Yes, but you know, what has happened is the creation of the new regions too has had an impact in terms of how things will go. The constituencies remain the same, but the regions are not the same. And I'm not too sure how even that would directly impact, but we should take into consideration the fact that we now have 16 regions instead of the 10 regions. I'm not an electoral predictor or poster like Ben Epstein and the rest. I will not pretend to understand all the details. But clearly, it's for the political parties to go out there, attract the votes with their messages and their organization and mobilization. That's the way I see it.
I've heard the NPP Secretary for Ashanti Region, Sampine, say it is how you harvest the votes.
Yeah, exactly.
And not the registration per se.
I agree.
Yes. Yeah. So I saw that you were doing the permutations yourself, and you're doing from various years on your piece of paper.
Yeah, no, so, I mean, there were 3 data points I wanted to use to try and make sense whether or not the EC data is sort of consistent with the projections. So the population projections by Ghana Statistical Service, but I've also looked at turnout figures, you know, just to make this point about whether or not it will translate into votes and so on. So if you take, for example, the voter region, the projection for 2020 was just about 1 million, just over 1 million in 2020 for the adult population. And EC data was able to capture 929,000. So
million or 1,000,
929,000. Right. So just under 1 million. If you look at the Ashanti figures, the projection was 3.3. EC captured 3.5. Greater Accra was 3.18. Ashanti was 3.18. EC captured 3.03 or so. So if you look at it, it's there and there.
But the national total, the projection
was about 17 million, and the EC captured 16 point was something. So if
almost 17 million.
Almost exactly, right?
Yes, but once we go through the challenge processes, complete the deduplication, the numbers are expected to come down.
Sure. So for me, if you look at the projections, you know, there's no big, you know, there's nothing that's alarmist for you to look at.
Okay.
Then if you look at the net gains and net loss, where some people are looking at these things. So in terms of, voters stayed almost the same. Upper East, Easting, I think was just about 1 point something difference. The net gains are Greater Accra, Northern Region, Ashanti, BA, and so on. But you see, you have to understand that migration is a big driver of population, you know, growth in various sort of regions. So if you take the cities in particular, there's a huge migration that's always going on. That's why the populations, you know, always swells up in those areas, particularly in Ashanti. You know, the corridors all the way from the north through the BA and so on into. So those things all make sense, even if you are getting it more than what the population projection is saying. That you can't. It's very difficult for you to account for how often people are moving into these cities and these areas.
What will be your comments about the 4.50% of first-time voters?
Yes.
The fact of women outnumbering men.
Yes, which is also consistent with the population as the gender dynamics.
Men 49.6, women 50.3.
It's very accurate. I don't think though that, I think what we need from the EC is not just 18 years, because 18 years does not necessarily equate to first time. 18 years, yes, but if you look at the last time that we did a full registration, which was in 2012, you really need to look at 18, 19, 20, 21 to really get a better sense of what the first-time voters population will look like. So that will give you some really good indication. Remember that almost what is close to 60% of the population is under 25, 70% under 35. 18 to 35 could be about 40%. So there's a huge young demographic group that the parties will be interested to see how they are going to capture they are going to basically determine the election in many, many, many places. But I just wanted to raise, the argument that people make about whether voters staying the same was as a result of closing the borders and so on and so forth. And that's why I tried to look at Upper East, because I'm looking at the border area. So yes, Upper East, we didn't see a big change.
No, but before the border area comment, what was the figures, percentages you gave for 18, and because we know that 18 years is 4.5.
Yes, according
and then 19 years is 3.6.
Yes.
And then 20 years and above is 91.9.
Yeah, so I thought they would break it, they would do another for 20 years and another for 21 years. Because I feel that there are a lot of, even though we've had limited registration, it was the district elections where a lot of people did not register. Then we had the regional. So we haven't really had a massive election where anybody who was 15 years at the time when the 2012 election was going on, most likely some have not registered throughout all this process to now. So they will be like, sorry, if you were 17 years or something, it's possible that you are probably 20 or 21 by now. So it'd be good to separate, rather than having 20 and above, which is everybody else, separate the 20 as well and separate 21. Then you really begin to see what the first-time voter looked like.
Okay. Now your border area comments. But I was going to say, I'm going to ask any of you, if you remember, it may be for the optics, but it's good. Please keep showing that. Do you remember any time when we have done this exercise and there is infographics that makes it easy?
Oh, yes.
There is comparative analysis of previous years?
Yeah, that is why this, sometimes I don't know why we shy away from information. Because, the more information you give, the more informed people are. And when, there are arguments about things, then you can refer easily to these things. So we need more of that. We need more of this information. I think the voter register, I think by law, they're supposed to put it on the website and so on and so forth. The challenge we have had, for those of us in civil society and academics, is that it comes in a PDF
So they've
format.
done a beautiful thing.
It comes in a PDF format instead of a CVS for you to do analysis, within the vote. So we're hoping that maybe we'll be able to get access to the actual document. The point about the border area. So I raised, I took the data for Upper East, because of Navrongo and Boko and other places. Upper West, actually there was an increase as well, in the Lamle areas, all of those places. But so if somebody makes the argument that, it's because they closed the borders and so on. So there's a suggestion that foreigners were in the register. That's why I was trying to look at the projections, the population projections, and what the EC captured. Right? That the voter region is not a migration corridor. People are not moving into the voter region. Often people are moving out of the voter region into mostly in the Tema areas, and other places. So I don't see any big difference. Certainly, closing the borders, you might even have prevented people who live on the other side but are Ghanaians who wanted to come. So I don't think, it's conclusive that just by looking at this, that is what you are going to get. The same in the Upper East and other kinds of places. Now, if you look at turnout, it's very, very interesting because in 2016, turnout for voter region was 61%. All right, it was the lowest, and probably it's been the lowest since. But even if you go back, right, 2000, turnout for voter region was 60%. 2004, turnout for voter region was 87.6%. 2008, turnout was 67.1%. 2012, it was 78.4%. And then the first time we had apart from 2000, this was the lowest, 61.8%. And we know that there was a huge issue about people in the voter region feeling marginalized, even by their own party. A lot of people didn't go back to go and vote and so on and so forth. So if you even look at the turnout figures, it is not like just looking at the registration number, you are going to get all the votes from there.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. If you look across, and actually after the biometric register, you can see that turnout figures have always been, it can be high as 71, 72, 73, but you are not getting the 80s and so on and so forth, because the biometric data system, disciplines that. If you are dead, you can't go and vote.
Exactly.
In the past, it's possible, but now it's not.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get Dr. Usu any final comments. But the question of those who may not have been able to participate, are you able to appreciate the question about, because of COVID, there may have been some people who did not. Beyond that, because of the border, they couldn't come. There may be some people around who are just not comfortable. Initially, I wasn't comfortable, but after, just when they were ending, my area, there are about 3 different registration centers just close by me. And I find I'm driving around and they are just idling. Yeah. Nobody is there.
And you remember the EC increased the centers. The polling stations to 33,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So reducing the number, the threshold number for each registration center, that also helped. So there were more places where you could register than before.
So I felt comfortable, went and registered. But is it possible that there are people who just didn't?
I know people who didn't register.
Yes, I have friends outside. In fact, I had 2 or 3 messages the last week wondering what happens to them, especially with the airport closed. But in doing some checks, a bed within the corridors of power hint dropped into my ears that possibly the airport, and the emphasis is on the airport, might be reopened, I think 1st September or 1st week September. The land borders will remain closed for whatever reasons. I mean, this is the information I got. Right. Now the question, and I think
if it is open, you mean there will be a dispensation for people to register, airport, or just walk into the...
Yeah, you see, when you register, and I think I heard the EC official say this, if you register and it's 50 days to the time, you cannot vote.
Participate.
But I'm not sure it's 50 days yet. There's still more time, isn't it?
Yeah.
But let's
because the law still gives room for continuous registration.
Yes, but it stops at a certain point. Yes. That is not 50 days to election.
That's right.
Yes, so assuming the airport was open September 1st,
right,
and people came in by September 6th, they can register.
Okay.
They can register and vote.
There will be time.
Yeah, there will be time. That's the point I'm making. Yes.
Because for Ghanaian officials who are in
because there will be some 3 months and so ahead. On. That's naturally like 60 days.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. Let's hear what you have to say about this, Dr. Usu.
Samson, let me point out three things quickly. The first one has to do with the gender. If you look at the Statistical Service projection of population, they have male population as around 47.06. The Electoral Commission actually had some 48%. If you look at the female population projected, Ghana Statistical Service has some 52.34%. The Electoral Commission actually had 51.74%. So it is a true reflection. The dynamics looks the same from the projection as to what the Electoral Commission had. Now, my senior talk about turnout. It is interesting to note that every other election, the turnout actually goes high or low. So, for instance, 1992, 94, 96, the turnout actually keeps on. If it increases this year, it will decrease the following year. So we had the turnout for last election being lower. We're expecting 2020 to be higher because 2012 was high, 2016 was low, 2020 will be expected to be high. Now, interestingly, all the presidential elections we had from 1992 up to 2016, if the turnout rate is less than 70%, the election either goes for a runoff or the exchange of government. So that is the dynamics that underlines that. If the turnout rate for the country is less than 70%, the election for the presidential goes for a runoff, or there will be a change of government. So these dynamics comes into place, and it is up to the political strategists for them to look at the numbers and see how best that they can push their message to the population in order to make sure that they fare well in the upcoming election.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Owusu-Ansah of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Dr. Emmanuel de Graft Johnson Owusu-Ansah of the Department of Statistics and Actuarial Science of the KNUST. We will take a break now, come and go to look at the questions of corruption, but the issue he just mentioned brings to mind your survey, or you as CDD had earlier suggested that there will be voter apathy. So that's worrying, isn't it? And,
yeah, I mean,
and looking at if there's going to be a certain smaller percentage, perhaps, and you have people who don't have the opportunity of registering and all. I remember people like Richard Sky actually wrote to the Electoral Commission saying that we are stranded, we want to be able to participate, but we can't. There was a ROPA. The courts asked the EC to do it within a time. It missed the time. It came to the court, begged for another period. They gave them the time, but unfortunately, it looks like they are not able to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, the point he makes about the every other election is quite interesting, because actually I feel it's counterintuitive. Normally, you would expect that when a regime is going to its second term, it actually generates, it wakes up, which is that either it's time for you to go, and therefore you get a lot more people going out. But actually, it's in the opposite, that in the years when we are getting a change, we have a lower turnout than, so it's quite contradictory. But yes, we have seen signs of voter apathy, particularly among the middle class, and also particularly among women. And that's why the women figures are quite interesting, because the other thing that the parties have to figure out is that the registration numbers, does it mean that people just want the card or they want to go and vote on election day?
People want the card for various reasons.
So yes, it's a big issue. So it means that you have to assume that people just want the card, and therefore you have to do so much work to persuade them.
But a greater number of the people already have the Ghana card.
Sure.
And if you have the Ghana card, and you are only looking for a card for purposes of bank transactions and the rest, then you don't need a voter's card.
Yeah, but they say that the voter's card is more acceptable than, so they are relying on experience. That it's better to have the voter because that is more acceptable for the transactions that they do. That's why they still want to go and get.
They haven't tried the Ghana card. That's why they are saying.
Sure. So those are the interesting dynamics. That if you just conclude that based on the registration numbers, you have won or you're lost.
Okay.
You'll be in trouble on election day.
All right. So we take a break here. When we return, we'll ask the questions about corruption. Corruption was a game changer in 2016. And if you remember, almost on a daily basis, the NPP had one story of corruption or the other to tell us. And the media, including platforms like Multimedia, Manasseh Azori Awene doing all the Jida, Suba, Sada, Kanazoe, the Ford expedition, all those corruption matters, the NPP majored on them and actually said they will save us a lot of money through, cutting the corruption to develop the country. Have they succeeded? Has the NDC done better in fighting corruption than the NPP? We'll be right back.